Welcome back to Self-Invested, where we talk about how you can do better with money. For this video, I've uploaded a chat I had with Amy from the Let's Relate podcast, where we talked about buying a house. During our chat, we talked about the importance of credit when buying a home, the different types of mortgages that are available to you, the role of a mortgage broker, and we also give some top tips for anyone that's thinking about buying a home. Now, because this is a podcast, it's an audio only chat, and the quality of the audio is a bit up and down. But if you can bear with the quality of the audio, then I think there's a lot of good information for anyone that's thinking about buying a home. So I hope you enjoy our chat. If you do, then please give the video a like, and I'll see you in the next one.
Let's talk about credit. Wow, that is such a big part. So what part does credit play in purchasing a house?
Okay, so unless you've got a lot of money to buy a property, you're probably going to need a mortgage to buy a property. And a mortgage is essentially a loan that you're taking out to buy a property. And a loan is a form of credit.
Yeah.
And credit is just where somebody gives you money up front, or they give you a service or a product up front with the expectation that you'll pay them later on. And you'll either do that in installments, or you'll do that in a lump sum. So with credit, when there's somebody that's willing to lend you credit, they want to make sure that you're a reliable person that's going to repay that credit. And that's usually something called credit worthiness.
Yes.
And if it was between two people, you might just talk about trustworthiness. They just want to make sure that if they give you money, that you're going to be a reliable person that's going to repay that money. So like I'll give an example.
Yeah.
So say you went to a bar with your girls, and one of your girls, they forgot their purse, and they wanted you to buy them a drink.
Yes.
And you'd be thinking in your head, like, how trustworthy is this person? If I buy them a drink, or if I'm buying them drinks all night, are they going to repay me?
Yeah.
Now, if this girl was somebody that, always very forgetful, always forgot her purse, but like the next day after you bought her drinks, she always repaid you without fail. You thought about it, you went into your memory, and you can never remember a time she didn't repay you.
Yeah.
You'll most likely be willing to lend that person or buy that person
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's known as good credit history.
Yes.
Because they've got a good record of repaying any credit that they've been given. Now, if you had another friend that wanted you to buy her drinks all night, and she forgot her purse, but when you thought about it, you remembered that this girl always forgets her purse, but she never gives me the money back the next day. I'm always chasing her, can never get her on the phone, and she rarely gives me the money back. Now, that would be an example of bad credit history.
For sure.
And I think those two examples are quite clear. One's got good credit history, the other one's got bad credit history. But the one people probably don't think about is no credit history. So imagine.
Exactly. I was about to say that, because it takes time to grow these things.
Yeah. So like, imagine you just met some girl in the bar, you don't know her from Eve, and she forgot her purse, and none of your friends know her, no one can vouch for her. She can't, there's no guarantor. Like, she's coming to you and she's like, oh, can you buy me a drink? She looks pretty, she's well dressed, but like, you don't know her from anywhere. Like, if she asks you to buy her a drink, or she asks you to get something expensive at the bar, like, you're not very likely going to give that person any money, or you're not going to buy a drink for her, because you don't know where she lives, you don't know who she is.
Exactly. You don't know if you're even going to get that back.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
And that's how it is with credit as well. So like, if you got no credit history, then that's almost the same as having bad credit history, because lenders aren't going to lend any money to you or give you any credit if you've got no track record of repaying credit.
Yeah.
So it's important. So as well as having good credit and not having bad credit, it's also important to have a credit history.
Yeah.
And this credit history is known as something is known as your credit file.
Yeah.
And that's what lenders look at. They look at your credit file to see how good you are with repay your credit.
How much you owe, how much credit you do have, how much of that credit you're spending. And this is really important because you're talking about people that have no credit. People that just moved to the country. Trust me, you don't have no credit. Maybe you've been young and you haven't really spent any credit at all. That's another thing. Or maybe you've only spent one kind of credits, maybe just overdrafts, but you really don't have credit cards or whatever. That's another thing, because I noticed that from someone I was close to as well. So literally, the reason why we even wanted to start it with the credit side is that you might actually need time to just build your credit. You might actually need time to focus on that and get it to a level before you even start thinking of buying, unless you have the cash. You know, especially if you're new to the country, you need to actually start, building your credit somehow.
And that's the thing. It sounds a bit odd, but like that's what you need to do. Like in order to be able to get a mortgage, you need to have sort of good credit history. And you got to remember, like when you're taking out a mortgage, it's probably the biggest form of credit you're ever going to take out.
Yes.
So you need to make sure that you have a good track record. So like if somebody's coming to the country and they don't have any credit history, like one thing they can do, which is sort of recommended by people like Martin Lewis, is get a credit card and spend maybe £50 to £100 every month, and you repay that money in full every month. Don't pay the minimum. Don't use it for like shopping. Don't use it for holiday. Just use it for the minimum shopping. Traveling, and repay it full every month. And you can, when you get a new credit card, you can actually, as part of the application process or the setting up process, you can actually say that you want to pay off the credit card balance in full every month. By direct debit. And by doing that, you sort of defend against the risk of not missing a payment or ending up with some bad credit history. So
no, definitely, that is definitely really good. And one thing I noticed, I think it was sometime last year, at some point I had paid off everything that I owe. I don't have any debts anymore. I'm all happy and everything, and I just chilled. I stopped using credit, and I will tell you, I got a message the next month from one of the credit check companies, and my score had gone down. I was like, are you kidding me right now? So not spending this money is actually not good for me. So I was really surprised, and it didn't go down like just by a few. It went down by 52 points. I was like, a whole 52. Do you know how long it's going to take me to put that back?
So it's important.
I would tell people that, look, so still use it, even if it's just a little bit. Just use it, even if it's just like, let's say maximum 20% of it, like, but just use something and make sure that it's things that you were going to pay for anyway, and just make sure that you're paying it off. So don't use it for something so huge that you know that, look, I'm still going to be spending the whole year trying to rack my brain on how to pay this back. So just make sure that you're spending on things that you would normally like already budget for, and then just do it consistently. So that will be my own plan for that. And also, there are lots of companies that you can literally download their apps and check your credit on a regular basis. So there's one called Credit Karma. So Credit Karma is on a weekly basis. Every 7 days, you can literally check. There's the Money Supermarket app also has the credit part of it as well. And there's even Clear Score. There's so many free ones as well. And even Experian, which is like one of the biggest, credit services or whatever, agencies. Like they also have an app that you can also download, and it's free. Unless you want some extra work, they can literally give you your monthly credit and show it to you for free. So that is another good thing to use.
Just to add to that. Just to add to that, I was going to say, like, well done for actually checking your credit file. And
seriously, I do.
So, like, you mentioned 3 different apps that you can check your credit file with. Now, they allow you to check your credit file for free.
Yes.
But there are 3 main credit referencing agencies. Now, that's what they're called, and that's who lenders use. Now, those 3 credit referencing agencies are Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Yeah, so all
Now,
these platforms, they use the different ones. That is why I actually have them, like, so I can compare and contrast and make sure that on each one.
That's the important thing, because okay, so as you said, so like Money Saving Expert Credit Club allows you to see your Experian credit file for free. And then, as you said, ClearScore, that allows you to see your credit file with Equifax for free. And then Credit Karma, that allows you to see your credit file for free with TransUnion.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea, as you said, to have all three, because you don't know who your lender for your mortgage is going to use.
Yes.
And the thing is as well, they all they look at information in a slightly different way, and they collect slightly different information about you. So you might have an issue with one of those credit referencing agencies, but you might have an issue with the other. So it's important to check with all three, just to make sure that there are no issues with your credit file.
And so that if you see something, like, raise it, like if you do see something that's not meant to be there, it just gives you access to raise it. And these apps, most times there's a part that you can literally click and it tells you how to raise a dispute, and that's basically it. So let's have a little break. We're going to be back in about 2 minutes, guys, and we're still going to be talking about how to buy a house. We're going to be right back. We are back from that little break, and Lemuel is still with us. So let's get on straight back into buying a home. All right, cool. So tell us a little bit more about the types of houses and flats that people could literally go for. So just give us a little breakdown of some types.
Okay, so there are 3 types of properties that you can buy, or should I say 3 types of tenures that you can buy with property. Now, the first one is freehold. Now, this is ideally what you want to buy when you're buying a property. When you're buying a freehold property, you're buying the land that property is on, and then you're buying the actual building as well.
Yeah.
And if you want to do any works to that building, then you don't need permission from any landlord, from any other person. All you need to do is make sure that you get your approval from the statutory authorities, like planning permission, or if you building regulations as well, like your building control, if you need to do any structural works to the building. But you're essentially, as much as you can, be the king of your castle, or queen of your castle.
Yeah.
So the next type of property you can buy is a leasehold property.
Yeah.
Now, the mistake that many people think with leasehold properties, I think most people know that you don't own the land.
Yeah.
Leasehold property, but as well as the land, you don't actually own the physical property either. You don't own your 4 walls. All you have with a leasehold is a right to live in that property for a fixed amount of time.
Yeah.
So typically, leases have been 99 years, up to 125 years.
Yeah.
But you are now getting developers that are building flats with longer leases from like 250 years to 999 years. Now, if you go for a leasehold property, that's definitely what you want to go for. You want to go for a very long lease, as well as having a fixed period. So, like, all right, at the end of that fixed period, so when the lease period is finished, like, get to the end of 99 years, you're going to have to hand back the keys to the freeholder.
Yeah.
So you've only owned that property for a fixed period of time.
Yeah.
There is, if you have a leasehold property, you can have the right to extend your lease, but that's an additional cost as well. So, like, if you want to extend your lease, say it's dropping in years, and you want to extend your lease, that's going to cost you more money. So on top of buying the flat, you got the potential risk of having to, extend it later.
More,
and what you need to be careful of with a leasehold property is a leasehold property that's close to 80 years.
Yes.
Because if a leasehold property drops below 80 years, then it becomes more expensive to extend that lease.
Yeah.
So you want to stay away from any leasehold property that's getting close to 80 years, especially if it's less than 83, 82, because you can extend your lease, but you usually need to be in that property for at least 2 years. You need to be the owner of that property before you can extend it. So that's very important. That's very important.
And then there's shared ownership as well.
Well, so there's share of freehold. So I'll touch on shared ownership, and I'll touch on help to buy as well, because those two schemes are quite similar.
Yeah.
But the third other type of property you can buy is the share of freehold. Now, share of freehold is almost a combination of freehold and leasehold.
Yeah.
This is where you're in a block of flats, and you're one of the tenants within that flat. You, as a collective, with the other residents, own the freehold of your building and the land itself.
Okay.
But that's usually through a company. So the company owns the freehold, and you're a shareholder of that company. And then the company then provides. The company then usually provides a very long lease, so you can get a lease of like 999 years or something like that. But it's better form of ownership than leasehold.
Yeah.
If you're getting a flat, it's definitely the ideal sort of situation if you're buying a flat to get a share of the freehold, where you can just work with a company and solicitors to extend your lease if you need to, and you're not dealing with any separate landlord that's going to have extortionate prices or fees for you to extend your lease.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah, and then help to buy. I'm sorry, the shared ownership.
Yeah. So shared ownership. This is a government scheme, and it comes under the banner of help to buy.
Yeah.
Now, with shared ownership, it allows you to buy a share of your home. So you can either buy between 25% to 75%. This is changing though. Soon you will be allowed to buy as little as 10% of your home.
Okay.
Now, when you buy that share, when you buy your share, you then the other share, the part of the property that you don't own is owned by a housing association, and the housing association will charge you a rent. Now, this is usually a subsidized rent, and it's usually 3% of the value of the property that you don't own. So that's going to be below market rate. But although you only own a share of your property and you don't own, the other share. So say you own 25% of your property and you don't own 75% of your property, you're still responsible for 100% of the cost. So if the roof was to cave in, or just your regular service charge that you get for the building, you're responsible for 100% of the service charge costs or any repair costs. So that's one thing to be careful of. I think if you go for shared ownership, my preference would be to go for a shared ownership house, because at least with a shared ownership house, you'll be responsible for 100% of the cost, but it would just be to your building.
Yes, it wouldn't be with other flats, and
it wouldn't be with other flats. So, and there's less to worry about. And the service charge is going to be much lower. Like, I don't know if people have watched the BBC Panorama episode, The Home I Can't Afford. If you haven't watched it, it will open your eyes to some of the risks when it comes to shared ownership. But you can very easily be in a difficult position, because the fact that you can only afford 25% of a property means that you're probably not the most financially strong to be
actually be buying
100% of service charge for that year. So you need to be careful of that. And shared ownership is tricky as well, because it's very difficult to staircase to 100% ownership, because when you initially buy that home, you're maximizing your affordability. They make you buy the most you can afford. So if you want a staircase, you need essentially for your salary to increase. Otherwise, unless you buy it as a single person, and then you have
maybe
a partner,
you got married, and
and then they can help you buy the remaining share. But then what you need to think about as well is that property values tend to increase over time.
That's true. So they can charge you for more later.
They can charge you for more later.
Days. This
so
is...
it can end up as a trap. Like it does work for people. There are many people. I'm gonna be talking to somebody on my channel who it's worked for. But like there are many pitfalls that you need to be careful with them.
You need to look at all of this. No, for sure. Let's talk a bit about mortgages. Like, what are some different types of mortgages that people could actually look into?
Okay, so there are three types of mortgages mainly. There's a fixed rate mortgage, there's a tracker mortgage, and there's a discount variable mortgage. And then there's a fourth sort of interest rate, which is called the standard variable rate, which is what you end up on after your fixed rate, tracker, or variable mortgage rate ends, your initial deal ends. So a fixed rate mortgage is usually it's where the lender offers you a certain rate for a fixed period of time. And that fixed period of time is usually between 2 to 5 years, but you can get longer fixed rate interest rates. And at the end of that fixed rate period, you then are moved onto your standard the lender's standard variable rate, which is basically their default rate and is usually more expensive than the rate you were on. So if you're getting to the end of your mortgage deal period, it's important to remortgage so that you can move to a cheaper rate and you don't end up on their standard variable rate, because that's going to be more expensive than the rate that you're on, and there's no reason to go onto the standard variable rate. It makes sense just to remortgage and get another fixed rate mortgage or one of the other types of mortgages. The other thing with fixed rate mortgages is that they tend to have higher early repayment charges than the other types of mortgages. So usually with fixed rate mortgages, you can overpay by 10% over a year. If you go over that, if you try to repay more than that in a year, then you usually get penalized. Or if sometimes people end up in a situation where they want to move during their fixed rate mortgage period, and to be able to move and get a new mortgage, they have to repay their mortgage in full. If they haven't got to the end of their mortgage period, then that means that they're going to have to repay their mortgage in full, and they're likely to end up with an early repayment charge. Now, the second type of mortgage, which is a tracker rate mortgage, is where the rate that you're offered, you're offered it again for a fixed period, usually between 2 and 5 years, but the rate that you're getting is linked to the Bank of England's base rate. So usually, a lender will say that we'll give you a mortgage rate 1% above the Bank of England's base rate for 2 years. So if you get that, and the Bank of England's base rate is currently 0.1%, that means that your interest rate for your mortgage will be 1.1%, because that's 1% above the base rate, and it stays that way again for the fixed for the period of time you have that deal. And the good thing about a tracker rate mortgage is that it tends to have a lower early repayment charge than fixed rate mortgages and discount variable mortgages. But there are tracker rate mortgages that don't have any early repayment charges at all. But it's just, you just need to check. And the best thing to do is to speak to a mortgage advisor as well, just to make sure you're getting the best mortgage for you. But as well, you need to be careful with a tracker rate mortgage that there's a risk of the interest rate going up. Because if the Bank of England's rate goes up, then you're going to be paying more in repayments every month. And I guess that's the positive of having a fixed rate mortgage. You know how much you're going to be paying for that fixed period of time. And I'll say, like, right now, it probably, unless you're worried about, early repayment charges or moving sort of during your mortgage period, it might not be the best time to get, because the Bank of England interest rate now is the lowest it's ever been, 0.1. And so it could go even lower, it could go to 0, it could go into minus. But, I mean, there's more chance, I guess, of it going up because it's low. It's low,
so it's gonna, most likely it will go the opposite direction.
And then the last type of mortgage is the discount variable rate mortgage. Now, discount variable rate mortgage is where it's a certain amount below a lender's standard variable rate.
Okay.
So the standard variable rate was what I talked about before, which is what you get moved onto once your mortgage deal ends. And usually you might have a bank say that we'll give you a discounted variable rate mortgage, which is 1% below our standard variable rate mortgage. And say the variable rate, the standard variable rate was 4%. The discounted variable rate, if it was 1% below that, would be 3%. And it will be that for the period that the deal lasts. And usually these standard variable rates are based on the internal finances of that lender. So they could change it going up or down without the Bank of England's interest. And it's determined by their internal forces. So it's a lot riskier in terms of risk of rate changing than a tracker rate mortgage. A tracker rate mortgage, discount variable rate is usually linked to the lender's internal standard variable rate. So it can be the riskiest of the three different types of mortgages.
Okay, cool. Like, we're getting through so much, but seriously, guys, it's a lot of information. Like, take your pen, your paper, rewind this, go back, write it down so you can remember it, because trust me, like, all these things are going to pop up if you are in the process. So what is the role of a broker in all of this? Like, and should people get one? Please just let us know.
Yeah. So a role of a broker is to work with you, a borrower, to find the best mortgage for you. Now, I personally think that as a first-time buyer, it makes sense to work with a mortgage broker. I worked with a mortgage broker to get my initial mortgage, and I also worked with a mortgage broker to remortgage our place after our initial mortgage deal ended. And the benefit of using a mortgage broker is that they understand how lenders operate. So they can look at your situation and work out which mortgage lenders are going to work out best for you.
That's true.
And they also help you fill in all of the applications. They trawl through all of your paperwork, your bank statements, and they do a lot of the legwork for you. Now, you've got different types of mortgage brokers. You've got mortgage brokers that charge you directly. So the first thing to say actually is all mortgage brokers make commission from the lender. Now, they usually make, I think it's around 0.37% of the mortgage. So no matter what a mortgage broker tells you, whether they charge you or not, they're making money from the other side.
Oh, that's a good one to know.
Now, this shouldn't put you off from using them, because there are lenders that just go direct to the borrower. They don't use brokers. But if they do use brokers, it's not going to be any cheaper. They're not going to. The lender's not going to charge any more for their product, whether you go through a broker or not. The only way it will be more expensive is if the broker charges a fee. Now, whether you go with a mortgage broker that charges a fee or not is up to you. I don't think you need to go with a mortgage broker that charges. Mortgage broker I worked with didn't charge me directly. They made their money from the commission.
lender.
So some charge you directly, and this could be anywhere between £100 to £500 or to £1,000. It just depends on their service and what they provide. Some charge you up front, and some charge you on completion. Now, I would stay away from any mortgage broker that charges you up
front for sure.
That's a risk. You end up risking paying money up front and not completing. Like, if you do pay money to a broker or they are charging you directly, make sure it's on completion. Now, the other thing to make sure, whether you're paying a broker directly or you're not, and make sure you go for a broker that has access to the whole market.
That they have a lot of lenders that they work with. Because
if they don't have access to the whole market, then there's a chance that they don't have access to a lender that will be able to give you the best deal for
deal, yeah.
So like make sure you go, and that's the question to ask them. Ask them if they have access to the whole market. And then the final thing I'll say on brokers is that they always try and sell you insurance.
They always try to do that for sure.
Now, I'm not going to bash them about this. It's their hustle. They need to make money. And also the insurance that they get, it may be valid. It may be a good insurance for you, but it doesn't mean that you need to have insurance from them.
Yeah.
So you get from them is likely to be more expensive because they also make commission on the insurance.
On that one. So,
And it's not just, they don't just make it from the initial payment. As long as you're paying that insurance, they are usually getting some money from it. They can continuously make money from commission. So that there are like websites where you can
find the best options.
Yeah. The Money Saver Expert website's a good one. They actually, I think they provide links to, I can't even remember. You know what? In your show notes, maybe we can
add some more information. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, there are places where you pay an upfront commission, where it's just like £25, and it works out a lot cheaper. Like I was able to get my insurance for I think £15 a month cheaper than what the broker was offering you. So yeah. You may need the insurance, but don't necessarily get it through your broker. You don't
need to get it from the broker. Okay, before we get into the last section, we're going to give you a little break, like get some water, listen to some ads, like get your pen and paper if you hadn't got it before, and rewind back and then come back forward, okay? We're going to be right back. So for you, what are your 5 top tips for buying a home? Like whatever comes up in your mind right now, like what would you tell a person that is about to start the process or is thinking about it? What are some good tips?
Okay. The first thing I would say is when you're buying the property, think about how easy it will be for you to sell it. So like, it's very likely the first property you buy is not going to be your forever home. Yes. So later down the line, you're going to need to sell it. So like, think of the type of property that you're buying. Like you might be willing to put up with things, like maybe there'd be no corridor in your house. Like maybe you just walk straight into the living room, stuff like that. But think to yourself, like, if this isn't your forever home, you need to think that you're going to have to sell it on. So you need to think what other people will like. Make sure you've got one eye on how you're going to get out of that property. Make sure there's good terms on your lease. Make sure it's a good location. Maybe stay away from stuff where it's on the top of a shop or it's right next to a train line, because you might be okay with that, but it might not be, to the taste of somebody else that wants to buy your property when you're selling it. Next thing is if you're buying a leasehold property, and you question anything you're unsure about. So when you buy a leasehold property, you're going to be given a lease before you complete, and there it's going to have all the terms and agreements with the freeholder who owns the building and owns the land. You want to make sure that you read through that document. The solicitor will read through it, but like, they're busy people. They can make mistakes, make errors, or they might just assume that you're happy with everything. So make sure you read through it and you ask any questions that you're unsure about, and make sure you get that in writing as well.
Yes.
It's very important that you understand that, and very importantly, check the lease, the length lease.
Yes.
As I said, you want to avoid anything that's close to 80 years.
Just leave it alone.
And you want a really long lease. You want something that's over 125 years, ideally. And check the ground rent. Ideally, you want the ground rent to be 0. But if there is ground rent, you want it to be
very low.
Probably, no more than $250 a year. Like, it depends on location. But also, you want to make sure that it doesn't increase any more often than every 25 or 30 years. If it increases more often than that, then it can work out more expensive for you in the long run, not just through the ground rent, but if you need to extend your lease in the future. The third thing is if you're buying a flat, make sure that there's a sinking fund for that building. Now, sinking fund is basically just a pot of money that the tenants of the building put aside for if there's any major repairs. Now, the reason why it's important to have this when you move into a building is that if there's any damage or if there's like a roof that needs to be replaced or anything like that, and there's no sinking fund, you're going to have to dip into your pocket to repair that. If you have a sinking fund, then that offers you some protection. It means that if there's any issues with the building that need to be sorted, there's already a pot of money there that can, that can help to pay for those costs, and it doesn't affect your own pocket. Next thing, be wary of developments where there's a lot to maintain, because you're going to have to pay for this through your service charge. So if there are many lifts, if there's loads of water features, if there's things like concierge service, these things may look nice, they may be nice, but you have to pay for them. And if you want to keep your costs low, I'd say stay away from them, because a lot of the time what you find is with new developments, they have all these fancy features and they have a certain amount on the service charge. But what happens is, like, a lot of the time I've heard so many stories where they underestimate what it costs. So like after the first year of buying that property, you find that maybe the service charge starts to increase and they tell you, oh, we have to increase it because we underestimated how much some things will cost.
Wow.
So that would be my next
all these extra stuff. Oh my
goodness. And then finally, make sure like any advice that you get from your solicitor, you get from your mortgage broker, you get from your surveyor, you get it in writing, because you want to have some recourse, you want to have some redress if there's anything wrong. Because just to tell you a quick story, like our solicitor gave us some bad advice. We found out a little while after, and we were able to go back to the solicitor's firm and get compensation from them because they gave us bad advice.
They gave you bad advice. No, so that makes a lot of sense.
That's the last important thing. Make sure whatever anyone tells you, don't just rely on that telephone conversation. Send them an email and just confirm it, and get them to confirm in writing. Get them to make sure you get things in writing, because then you have a bit more protection than, just word of mouth.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense.
So that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you give the video a like, and I'll catch you in the next one.